Hi everybody, I'm Nix and I'm a flexibility coach, and I'm here to talk to you today about end range strength. So diving right in, what is end range strength? End range strength can be referred to as the amount of force that a muscle is able to produce at its furthest extent of range of motion. So this can be either fully lengthened or fully shortened. So we're basically looking at the difference between our passive flexibility and our active flexibility. Now, in communities like this, where we have all the desire in the world to be our most flexible selves, we really do want to be conscious about the strength that we're building in our end range, as well as the amount of flexibility that we have. So the difference between our passive flexibility and our active flexibility refers to how much we are able to control the range, how much we are able to put ourselves in there without the assistance of the floor, a hand, etc. And another way of looking at it is the difference between a person who's able to sit on the floor in the front splits versus someone who's able to slide down with control all the way down and maybe even put a pause in there. The difference there is strength. Okay, it takes a lot more strength to be able to slide down with control than it does to be able to sit on the floor. So when we own our range, as I like to term it, we're able to use it in a lot more ways, but at the same time, we can sustain the load a lot more, so we're less likely to get injured. So taking care of details like making sure that we have the strength along the way as we're building our flexibility is definitely valuable, way beyond the tricks that we're able to do. Okay, so there are two things that we can look at when we're thinking about strengthening our end range. So firstly, these would be strengthening in supported or assisted ways. For example, when we're on the floor or on blocks and using load. And then the second thing is when we're displaying active positions where we ourselves are contracting the muscles to bring us into the end range. So an example of this would be a jade split or handstand split, split leaps, inverted splits, all the things where we don't have like our hand bringing us into the position. Okay, then very practically, how do we own our range? How do we do this? How do we get stronger? Okay, so in the front splits, my favorite drill to use is the long lunge. And the reason for this is because we do this position unsupported and with isometric holds, we build a lot of strength at the same time that we systematically develop our flexibility. So what we're doing there is we're creating a strong glute contraction and stretching out the hip flexors, and at the same time, as we're able to progress, we will slowly but surely increase our range of motion. So we'll widen the stance between our feet, obviously heading towards the front split. So that's one of my absolute favorites. It also really helps people to make that connection with the glutes in hip extension. So it's not just about forcing our hip flexors, but actually using our glutes to enable us to get deeper in the position. All right, then in the side splits, one of my favorites in a very similar way is the straddle up. So straddle ups again force us to hold the position at the top, even if it's for a short period of time. So we can't go so deep that we can't maintain that position. So once more, we're able to build strength and then only move deeper in a way that we can control. So of course we will use supported positions as well, but ensuring that we use positions like the long lunge and straddle ups in our sessions, it really just makes sure that we also building the strength at the same time. So one of my mentors said it really nicely. He said, you own the range and then strengthen the hell out of it. And I love that. And one of my clients also says that she loves her sessions so much because it not only helps her to see progress in her splits, but at the same time, they feel very fortifying. I love that description, fortifying. It's so nice to know that we're doing something good for our bodies at the same time as we're chasing all these amazing expressions of range and strength, and we're asking so much of them at the same time. Adding load is a fantastic and so highly underestimated way to build flexibility. So what we can do is when we're in a stretch, we can just use the assistance of some load. So it helps us to get deeper into the stretch without having to work quite as hard. And the nice thing about this is that even if it's a light dumbbell, because we've got to sustain the load, the body's going to work nice and hard. We're going to get nice contractions there, so we inevitably build strength. A really nice example of this is the wall hip flexor stretch, where we use some load to get deeper into the hip flexors. And another one of my favorites to use load for is the pike fold. So people are often so surprised and actually quite shocked to see how much more they're able to access in their hamstrings just by adding a little bit of load to help them get deeper. One of the things that we want to consider when we're adding load is how much load to use. Okay, so firstly, people will ask me, is it fine if I use a dumbbell, kettlebell, plate, whatever? It doesn't matter what type of load that you use, as long as you've got a way to measure it. So you want to be able to measure whether you're using 1 kg, 2 kgs, 5, all of that. So that's why bands can work really, really nicely, but using a weight or something like a cable machine in various instances is super handy because you can track that progress very, very clearly. Okay, so let's get into it. All right, in my hamstring stretch, so I'm using enough weight, okay, so if I go from my squat to pike, all right, I have my squat, then I go into my pike, and I can feel in this stretch the weight is helping me to get a bit deeper. Then I know I'm in a good place, okay? The weight is helping me to get a bit deeper. If I find myself starting to resist, like I come to this point and I'm like, I can normally go deeper, but today I really don't want to because this weight is resisting and the nervous system is screaming like, don't go there, it's too dangerous, that type of thing. You know you've gone a little bit too deep. If you start restricting your range even more, so you're not going to the ranges you normally access without the weight, then you've gone a little bit too heavy. Okay, so what we want to then do is just reduce the amount of weight that you use. Okay, so basic principle, we want the weight to help us get deeper into the range, but not so heavy that it's restricting our movements, that we're holding back on our range. Okay, so then what we will then think about is over time, we want to then, when we reached a really nice point, this helped us to open up our hammies a lot, then we can start reducing the amount that we use, and so that it forces us to strengthen the shortening side of the joint. So over here, what I do eventually want to be able to do is to be in the same range that I could access with the weight without it. And by doing that, it's strengthening. In order to do that, I mean, I have to strengthen my quads, hip flexors, and my abs. This is the shortening side. This is the lengthening side, okay? So over time, we start off with using all the weight to get to the range. Then we slowly but surely reduce the amount of weight in increments. Don't go from 10 kgs to nothing. Just reduce it slowly but surely until you can access that same position without the load. Then we can look at doing contractions. So there's PNF, pals and rails, contract, relax method, crack method, all the acronyms that you can think of. They all have their own flavor and they differ slightly, but they all rely on a very similar principle, and that is to contract and relax the muscles on either side of the joint in intervals to help us get deeper into the stretch and also at the same time build strength. Okay, so a really nice example of using contractions in our stretches is when we're in the lunge stretch for our hip flexors, okay, against the wall. So what I can do here is I can settle into the stretch for say 30 seconds or so, ease into it, allow the stretch to accumulate, then I can apply my contractions. So in this example, there's a couple of ways we do this, but just as an example, I'm going to keep driving my hips forward, engaging my glutes, and I'm going to press into my foot into the wall as if I'm trying to push that wall away from me, keeping everything nice and still, nice and straight, nice square hips, and working really hard pressing against the wall. Then I'm going to relax. So that interval will be say 10-15 seconds. Then I'm going to relax for the same amount of time. Then I'm going to do the opposite. So now I'm going to again keep everything still, squeeze my glutes, and work really hard to bring that foot away from the wall. Hammies fire up really nicely in that one. Then again, I'm going to relax into the stretch. see if I can get a little more space, find a little more depth, and we can perform, say, 2 rounds of contractions with each set that we do on the stretch. So this type of contraction work can be done across the board in our stretches, which is why it's such an amazing tool. So we can do this, for instance, in our butterfly stretch. So if we're in our butterfly or Taylor's pose, either elevated or on the floor. Let's do it elevated today. So what's quite nice to do here is to put some weights. My pants aren't giving me enough space here. Okay, to put some weight on my knees, all right? And then what I'm going to do is the same principle. So I'm going to press my hands here and then press into my hands. So I've got a really strong contraction through the groin and the inner thigh muscles, adductors, 10 to 15 seconds, and then I'm going to relax. So I can work really hard. Then I'm going to do the opposing side. So what I like to do here is to have feedback. So I'll put something down here on either side, a block on either side, and then I'm going to use my glutes to pull me deeper, work really, really hard, pressing into the block, squishing that block as much as I can, and then relax again into the stretch and see if I can get a little more out of it. Okay, then looking at active flexibility. All right, so the easiest example of this is when somebody says to me, okay, Nix, I can kick my leg up and down for days, but I cannot hold it there to save my life. All right, so for that person, we know that flexibility is not an issue. They have the range, easily accessible, but they cannot hold it, so they do not have the strength yet. So we've got to build that strength up. All right, we see active flexibility all the time in the pole and aerial communities because everything is up in the air. So any splits that you do there, you've got to have the active range to be able, you've got to have the active strength rather, to be able to be in those positions. Once more, jade splits, inverted splits, all of those kinds of things. And the standing tilt, where we're leaning over to the side and essentially trying to do the side splits without the floor helping us to get into the position. So some of my favorite drills for these would be like the standing hip flexor drills, where we can do those in parallel as well as in straddle, where we're standing up and moving the leg out, lifting the leg out in front of us and to the side. Then for hip abduction, the kneeling hip abduction drill just never goes out of style, where we're kneeling down and lifting our leg up over a target or something like that to keep us working nice and hard. It's also commonly called the pissing dog for obvious reasons. And then to be more specific, also to compression work, seated drills like seated in pike or again in straddle, where once more we're doing leg lifts. So their hip flexors are working really hard, as well as the abs, in order to lift the legs, and then at the same time we work in straddle, so we're getting some abduction work there too. Okay, so how are we able to build this type of strength without bashing our heads against the wall in frustration? All right, I'd love to give you a hack. I'd love to give you a quick fix, which I cannot, but I can give you some tools that will help you, and if you stay consistent, I know that you can get so much stronger than you think. All right, so the first one is strategy. All right, in this type of work, it's so easy to get caught up in that trap of trying this drill the 1 week, maybe for 2 weeks I'll try that one, and they're all fantastic drills. They're all in that classification of building hip flexor strength or building abduction strength. But the reality is that unless we do something repeatedly, we never really give ourselves a chance to get really good at it and also then see progress. So you kind of like go around on this hamster wheel. All right, so that's the first thing. We've got to have strategy, making sure that you get enough repetition of a drill in order to see progress. Then there's a couple of tips that I'd like to give you to keep you progressing. All right, so the first one is to make sure that you are hitting the required amount of seconds in a hold on each set. That's programmed for you. Okay, so this sounds very simple. Obviously, if I have 5 seconds there, I'm going to do it. But when you're in that position, it's super easy. It's so hard. You don't want to be there. It's super easy to shortchange your seconds and like do 4 seconds if it was prescribed for 5, or 8 seconds if it was prescribed for 10. Now, it doesn't seem like a lot in one set, but over 3 or 4 sets in a session, and then compound that over the weeks, that's a whole lot of gains that you've left on the table just because you didn't feel like eking out that one last second. So that's the first thing. Now, also going with that is to use a metronome. This sounds so silly. Okay, so a metronome measures our time. It has these ticks. All right, and the thing is, when you're in that position, you're hating your life, your soul has left the building, you want to dive out, I promise you, you will count faster than actual seconds. Okay, I had one coach who was watching my work, and he said to me, yeah, next time was great, but those were short seconds. Let's try for actual seconds next time. And it stuck with me since then, and I've used a metronome ever since, okay? So that's just a great, very easy tool to make sure that you're getting the prescribed amount of time. All right, then the second thing that we want to make sure that we're doing is measuring our progress. All right, so in some of these drills, it's quite hard. Like you're lifting off the floor, but you're lifting into empty space. You're like, it kind of looks like I made some progress from last week, but I'm not really sure. So having tools to measure our progress is super important. So an easy way to do this, like if you're doing leg lifts on the ground, have blocks next to you where you can lift. Oh, last week I lifted up off the short side, but now I'm lifting up higher and I'm actually able to lift over the block. Okay, so these types of things keep you motivated, and it also gives you a really nice visual target to work towards, which also helps us to work harder. It works really nicely for me. If I'm working really, really hard, but then I see my target is just a little higher, I will find the grit in me to lift it up just those extra 2 centimeters. And then the last thing is to make sure that you're applying progressive overload. So this is across the board in all of our flexibility work. Progressive overload is super underestimated. So in one of these positions, again, we have discomfort and we don't have the ease of, like, last week I had 5 kgs on the bar, this week I'm going to have 10. We've got to make it harder in other ways, okay? So once more, adding a few extra seconds onto our lifts, or using a little bit of weight to make it a little bit harder. But the main point is to not wait until you're comfortable in the exercise to make it harder, right? Because leg lifts, even if you do the lowest of leg lifts, they're still hard. It's still tough. But in order to make sure that you're progressing, we've got to almost force ourselves to make it harder. Okay, so after a few weeks of holding for 5 seconds, we've got to force ourselves. Even if you don't feel like you can hold 10 seconds, force yourself into that next progression, so that we can really build nice strength. So remember to use when you're ready and not when you're comfortable as a guideline. So those are just some tools to work with. That they really are, they seem simple, but I promise you, if you start applying them diligently, you will see a huge difference. So that's all that I've got for you today. I hope that you've enjoyed this. I hope you've learned something or seen some fresh perspectives on things that you knew before. And if you'd like to check out some more of my work, you can find me on Instagram at flexibilitypixie, or you can have a look at my website at flexibilitypixie.com. And if you'd like to try out a front splits masterclass, I have available for free if you just sign up through the link. Thank you for your time and take care.